Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this installment, BT Edmondson's life is thrown into disarray when she adopts a pug named Patrick. Lazy schoolteacher Sarah, played by BT Edmondson, has just been dumped when she learns that her grandmother has died and Sarah has inherited her spoilt pug, Patrick. Sarah is not happy about a dog she doesn't want, not just because her landlord has a no pets clause, but Patrick is badly behaved and ruins her every effort to control him. But as she grows to love Patrick, he does wonders for her love life as she can choose between a vet, played by Ed Scarin, and a sensitive dog owner, played by Tom Bennett, while she shapes up for a sponsored 5k run. Not to be confused with the Ozploitation movie the same name, or its subsequent remake, Patrick is a vehicle for BT Edmondson, who is the daughter of Bottom star Adrian Edmondson and Jennifer Saunders, and the film is directed by Mandy Fletcher, who is known for her television work including Blackadder, but also directed Saunders in Absolutely Fabulous the Movie, a film which BT Edmondson had a bit part in. Fletcher is also credited as one of the 3 writers on this movie, but the real creative force behind it is Vanessa Davies, as the film is loosely based upon her experiences. She makes her writing debut with this movie, but she's not a newcomer to the film world, because she commonly works as a publicist. She was the publicist for all the Harry Potter movies, and then later the Star Wars films. She's Emma Watson's publicist. This might explain why this movie got otherwise inexplicably picked up by Disney of all people in the UK. That's right, this is a wide-release Disney movie you probably never even heard of. But wait, it gets weirder still. You might recall recently there was a World Cup on, and UK distributors don't like to release any big movies up against it, figuring it will hurt their box office, so they release either counter-programming or flops they know they have to offload, and then they wonder why no one goes to the cinema while the World Cup is on. Anyway, Disney, in a baffling decision best known to themselves, decide to swap the release dates of Patrick and Ant-Man and the Wasp, so that Ant-Man and the Wasp opened a month behind everywhere else in the world, and we were one of the last territories to get it. This ticked off a lot of Marvel fans, not least because Patrick is a very inadequate replacement, to put it mildly. Patrick is a dog. Literally and figuratively. Look, I'm aware that not every movie needs to be a big, huge blockbuster with world-ending stakes, and that's fine. In fact, I would even argue that we need more movies like this. Small, pleasant films, like Patrick is clearly aspiring to be. All I'm asking for is something approximating substance, something that resembles cohesive narrative storytelling, or considering that this is supposed to be a comedy, jokes, things that make me laugh. Instead, Patrick gave me nothing. It is 90 minutes of nothing. I'm really thinking that I'm going to be straining to talk about things about this movie because it is pervasively airheaded. Even by the standards of dog films, which are normally formulaic, this is threadbare. You've seen numerous iterations of this kind of movie before, be it Turner and Hooch, Beethoven, K9, etc, 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 and they're all better than this. I've seen Hallmark movie variations of this film that are probably better than what Patrick is. And part of this goes down to the fact the movie really does nothing with its setup. It sets up the idea of the snob versus the slob, and they've kind of flipped it because the dog is the pampered one, but really, it doesn't change up the formula. It's just the standard dog antics that you would expect. And what makes it worse is that the filmmakers have obviously made a decision to make sure that Patrick acts like a dog would actually act, and I can get behind that. At the same time, what he actually gets up to, be it stealing food from the fridge, accidentally locking Sarah out of her car, getting into places that he shouldn't, or pooping on the floor for some child-friendly slapstick, none of that is particularly novel, none of that is particularly surprising. Sure, dog owners will relate to that, but we've seen these scenarios again and again and again. At best, it's generic. At worst, it's insipid and dull. quite frankly, for long stretches. And what makes it worse is that you can almost see the film avoiding its own comedic setups at points. It sets up the idea that Sarah's landlord has a no pets clause and is on the lookout for Patrick, and you think this is going to be a subplot, you think this is going to be a running joke all the way through the movie, and instead the film sets it up and then resolves it off screen. Even the most dramatic moment in the movie, and that's pushing it, is when the dog accidentally eats chocolate and has to be rushed to the vet, and that happens off screen. The actual incident where he eats the chocolate, just someone walks in going, oh well, he accidentally ate a Snickers. Could we have not seen that? It was more interesting than what was actually happening on screen. They're clearly coasting on the charm of the dog, and admittedly, a really cute dog. I mean, if anyone was carrying this movie, it's the dog, because they cut to close-ups of him as many times as possible, and he almost looks like he's reacting at points, and he's really genuinely adorable, but it seems like at certain stretches of this movie, it's almost like an experiment to see just how much a cute pug can carry a 90-minute movie, and I can conclusively say, not very much. In the lead role, I think that Beatty Edmondson could be really charming. I think she shows flickers of that all throughout this movie, and I think that given the right script and the right role, she'll really break out. This isn't it, to be brutally honest, but I want to be clear here that none of the film's faults has to do with Edmondson. I think she plays the part exactly how it's written, and she gives it a lot of energy, and she's clearly very game. The problem is the material that she's given, and the way that Sarah is written on the page. She's so cluelessly klutzy, so inept, that it frankly beggars belief, and at a certain point it almost becomes infuriating, because you just wonder how she functions on a day-to-day level at a certain point. It really becomes that bad. She's the kind of person that if she didn't have her head on her neck, she'd probably drop it somewhere. Even Bridget Jones would probably tell this woman that she's a bit of a mess and that she should sort herself out, which is fitting for two reasons. The first being that Edmondson also had a bit part in Bridget Jones's Baby, and the second is the filmmakers were clearly trying to make Bridget Jones, but with a dog. The film actually seems like the worst script Richard Curtis never wrote, unless he was held at gunpoint and injected with horse tranquilizers. And so many scenes in this movie begin with Sarah oversleeping constantly. One of the earliest times this happens, she oversleeps her grandmother's funeral. The film shows its real uncertain tone by cross-cutting the funeral with slapstick shenanigans as she frantically rushes to get ready, as she's struggling to put on her dress, and then she arrives at the reception and she's got it back to front, and it's not even in a subtle way. I mean she's got the zip blatantly showing all the way down the front, and it's extremely obvious. I mean, how does this woman actually manage a classroom? Honestly, later on in the movie, there's a moment where she has to wake up for the first day of school and she oversleeps that, and yet somehow she still has time to take the dog out for a walk. Well, if that's the case, you're not that late, clearly. This film so utterly strains for jokes that at one point there's even a scene where Patrick chases off deer while Sarah impotently rushes behind him trying to call out his name, and you immediately go, oh, they're referencing the Fenton video on the internet. Do you remember that one? Fenton! Fenton! Oh, Fenton! Yeah, that one. They actually reference that in this movie. How many years ago was that? Just the level of comedic desperation on screen is simply baffling. And then the movie tries to fashion itself as a rom-com as well. Tries to set up this love triangle. The trailer actually builds itself with the horrendous hashtag of pug actually. Ugh. She has to choose between two possible suitors. One of them is Tom Bennett's dog walker, who's nice and pleasant, and she keeps bumping into him in the park, and he's totally bland. We don't really know very much about him for most of the movie, other than he used to be a bit of a hell raiser when he was younger, so he knows how to break into a car if needs be. But 3/4 of the way through the film suddenly drops a reveal about this character, and I hesitate to call this a twist, because honestly, it changes nothing. It's just a small, oh, that connects with that. Oh, that's mildly surprising. Better still is Ed Skeren's vet character, who gets a big introduction in this movie. The first time we see him, she imagines him in a fireman's outfit for no particular reason other than it'll be a good shot they can put in the trailer, but otherwise that has nothing to really do with anything. They introduce this character, and clearly he's meant to be Hugh Grant's Daniel Cleaver in the Bridget Jones movie. He's meant to be the analog character to that, so he's kind of a little bit smarmy, but they don't do anything with that because Hugh Grant's character is actually quite witty and entertainingly written, whereas Skeren just kind of pops up at certain points in this movie, and at a certain point, he just sort of drops out of the film. Halfway through the film, they set up a date with this character, and then he doesn't show up for a really long period of time. He actually leaves her sat at the table, and then shows up so late that he actually apologises and goes, "Sorry, I was watching Game of Thrones." You don't even have to be watching First Date to know that that's a dumpable offence right there, made worse by the fact that that was a date that he organised. He has no excuse there. He honestly doesn't. And so that's kind of the point where you'd expect the character to drop out of the movie, and for the most part, he does. But then he keeps showing up every so often, like a bad smell, and he sort of tries to make amends, I guess? But I'm like, why are you still in the movie? We've kind of just wrapped up this character. He doesn't need to keep popping up. And yet, he keeps coming back. And at a certain point I went, are you stalking this poor woman? Leave her alone! Get out of this movie! We're done with this character. We're done with him. They're not the only actors in extremely underwritten roles. There's a lot of recognisable British faces in this movie that show up to do exactly zilch. Former Doctor Who actor Peter Davison pops up as Sarah's father, and he gets to do exactly nothing. You guessed it, in a couple of scenes. Bernard Cribbins, speaking of Doctor Who, also shows up in this movie as a pensioner. He uses a new motorised scooter, so that's what Sarah runs for in the 5K. He shows up in a pair of scenes to justify that. That's his sole purpose for being in this movie. He pops up, wants to establish this, and then wants at the end to wrap it up. Otherwise, the only other big actor in this movie is Jennifer Saunders. Quite literally, she pops up in an extended guest role / cameo appearance, clad in a fat suit playing a fellow teacher at Sarah's school. And I guess this was there to just show a bit of support for her daughter and to give a bit of star power to the film, but it's really distracting and unnecessary. She doesn't do anything particularly amusing other than occasionally seeming like she's trying to steal the limelight from her daughter. There's almost a sense at certain moments of, oh mum, not helped by the fact that they even do an in-joke at one point. She's dressed up as a fairy godmother at one point, you know, because she played that in Shrek 2. Was that really necessary? But at least those provide a momentary distraction from the fact that even from the halfway point, this movie is running on empty, because by that point it's already ran out of things it can do with Patrick, and it's already resolved the love triangle that was supposed to be the main crux of this film. And so the movie just has to pad itself out to 90 minutes, and to do that, it fills itself with a myriad of subplots and distractions. Oh, one of Sarah's students, her parents are going through a divorce, so Sarah helps her out with tutoring. Another set of Sarah's students are stealing hubcaps, so she coerces them into joining the 5K with her. Things like that happen, but really don't add up to very much in the grand scheme of things. They just make it longer, quite frankly. And even the movie is aware of just how little is going on in it, and how little there are in any kind of dramatic stakes, that in the third act of the movie, it does something that's almost unintentionally hilarious. It separates Sarah and Patrick in the most contrived possible way. Sarah's walking Patrick back home, and for some reason, he's not on his lead. And do you remember how I said that Patrick chases after cats? He sees a cat on a houseboat and chases after the cat. Sarah is completely oblivious to this, but Patrick goes after the cat and he dives onto a boat that happens to be between him and the cat, and immediately, the second that he lands on it, the boat just tears off with him on the back of it. And I immediately went, who's driving the boat? Just, who is this madman that drives for hours, days, seemingly, in the film's timeline, with a dog on the back of it, and apparently just doesn't care? Oh, I appear to have abducted a dog by accident. Oh well. And the last section of the movie is all about the 5k run. It's been building up to this and building up to this. She's been practicing and practicing and practicing. They've reiterated it so much that we know it's the climax of the movie. It's the culmination of her character growth. She's this lazy person, but she's taking on this big challenge by her standards, and she's going to come out of it a stronger person. It's the culmination of her arc. That's how it would be in a good movie. That's not how it is in Patrick, however, because clearly the budget was more of a concern to the filmmakers than the actual story they were telling. Because why pay for 2 or 3 days worth of filming with extras? We could just do one. Just have them all at the finish line. We'll shoot all the scenes there clearly on the same day, and we'll just work around it. How do we work around it? I'll tell you how they work around it. Sarah oversleeps the beginning of the race. No joke. That genuinely happens. And at that point, I almost threw up my hands. Because the movie just completely negated any kind of character growth. The one thing that we know for certain that was the big goal of this character, and she almost sleeps through it. And at that point you go, well, she hasn't changed at all. There's no change in her character throughout the entirety of the movie. She just ambles along and stuff happens around her, and that pretty much sums up the entirety of the movie. It's just a load of stuff happening, and pretty much most of it takes place in the same park. Half the movie seems to be shot in that one location. Clearly that was very cheap to film in. That's why half the climax is just her running through it. How Patrick ever got itself a theatrical release, let alone one from Disney of all people, is frankly a mystery for the ages. This movie is destined to fill up afternoon TV schedules, and I guess if you catch it that way, it's not unwatchable, it's extremely harmless and innocuous, but I guess if you're a really forgiving viewer that likes any movie with a dog in it, or any movie that's a rom-com, you might get some value out of it, but really this is bland, boring filmmaking where you could watch anything else over it and it would probably be an improvement. Watch Marley and Me, watch Turner and Hooch, watch Bridget Jones, the film that this is clearly aspiring to be. Not this. Not if you have a choice between it. Don't make the same mistake that I did. This is dog poo. Patrick may be an intentionally light movie, but it didn't have to be in the entertainment department too. Even by the standards of a dog movie, this is extremely bland fare where the routine premise of a slobbish owner dealing with a snobby pet barely yields any more than some basic slapstick, and there's only so much an admittedly very cute pug can cover. Beatty Edmondson could do well in the right film, but here is stuck playing a character so inept and clumsy, no wonder the dog is leading her around. The movie shares the same lack of commitment as it graciously and lethargically goes from subplot to subplot to find even a modicum of a story. It doesn't even know whether it wants to be a kids film or a cute rom-com, and thus barely qualifies as either. Woof, indeed. If you like this review and join my Patreon, then you're definitely barking up the right tree, as you can see my reviews early among other perks. But until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.